the biggest crash since Black Monday 1987. Black Monday 2008 wipes more billions off the stock exchange. As a new crisis in confidence sent shares through the floor around the globe today, one super wealthy banker was answering for his part in the financial meltdown.
Also on News at 10, the hero soldier who should have survived, how this man paid with his life for a catalogue of military mistakes. Anger and hatred for the drink-drive footballer who killed two young brothers, starting a 7-year sentence tonight. And the passionate recyclers who discovered that points really do make prizes.
Good evening. A new crisis in confidence gripped the world's financial markets today and sent shares in London plummeting. In the worst collapse of the current financial crisis, the FT 100 share index lost nearly 8% of its value. It's the biggest one-day fall for 2 decades, since the crash of 1987, in fact. A common statement on the crisis by the Chancellor, Alistair Darling, did nothing to stop the slide here, nor did the first meeting of the Prime Minister's new National Economic Council. Mr. Brown said tonight that he was ready to take action to prevent irresponsible risk-taking by banks. Our economics editor, Daisy McAndrew, reports on the crisis of confidence.
It's been 21 years since we suffered this kind of devastation, an overseas storm arriving with scant warning, but leaving the country ravaged, the landscape changed forever. Today in the city there was reminiscing of October 1987, not the great storm we remember, but the biggest stock market crash in memory until today. The great storm of 87 was an act of God. Some today seem to suggest this storm has other architects.
But when risk-taking crosses a line between the responsible entrepreneurship we want to celebrate and irresponsible risk-taking, then we have to take action to ensure that markets work in the public interest to reflect our shared values.
But whoever's to blame, desperate city traders looked to politicians for guidance and confidence today. Exactly what the Prime Minister's new economic war cabinet is meant to give. Attending the twice-weekly meetings will be a dozen cabinet ministers, as well as financial experts brought in to help weather the storm. Like Paul Miners, a city veteran who used to be a pension fund manager, he's a hedge fund expert and former Marks & Spencer boss. And Lady Vadera, a former investment city banker who has been Gordon Brown's long-standing economic advisor. And of course former Trade Commissioner Peter Mandelson, who went straight to hospital after the meeting to have a kidney stone removed. But with stock markets in free fall, there's no time for bed rest. When a year ago the FTSE fell to 6,250, it seemed a crisis. That was nothing. Today it slumped almost 8% to 4,589, its biggest one-day fall in 21 years.
Banks aren't lending. They're not lending to corporates. Corporates are having a heck of a time refinancing current bonds. They've got line of credits they need to tap into. And as banks pull back credit, it makes it very hard for the non-financial part of the world, you know, the economy.
And banks not lending affects everyone, as shown in today's terrible car sale figures, down by more than a fifth. And tomorrow, figures from the British Chambers of Commerce will deliver nothing but bad news. Daisy McAndrew, News at 10.
The meltdown in European markets wasn't helped by confusing signals from Europe's leaders. Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel finally tried to clear up what she really meant to say to her nation's savers. Our Europe correspondent Robert Moore reports now on the damage caused by a promise that was apparently lost in translation.
If Europeans thought the credit crisis was an Anglo-Saxon problem centred on Wall Street and the city, then today was a major wake-up call. No wonder leaders were so worried. The stakes are rising by the day. Across capitals stretching from Madrid to Reykjavik, banks and governments alike are under extraordinary pressure. Iceland may seem remote, but its financial sector has enjoyed stunning growth. And now, as it faces meltdown, The whole nation is in peril.
Well, what happened in Iceland is that we had a good time. We had a great party. But now we have hangovers.
Some countries like Denmark have moved to guarantee 100% of all deposit accounts in a dramatic but controversial step to reassure savers. The German Chancellor seemed to be following suit, but now there's confusion here in Berlin. These were the words of Chancellor Merkel yesterday. She said, "Your savings are safe. The federal government is standing for that." Well, it sounded like a 100% guarantee. But now it seems her words had been lost in translation. What she meant to say was, "We'll not pass any new legislation to protect savers. Our commitment is just a political one." And that's a commitment our own Chancellor has also made. Many analysts here recall that the Third Reich and Nazism was born from Great Depression and economic collapse.
It's quite unlikely that something like the Third Reich would happen again because of the financial crisis. I mean, that's quite far-fetched if you think logical about it. But I think as a fear in the background of the minds of everybody, it's still there.
There's been hyperactivity across Europe. Lots of leaders like President Sarkozy sounding grave and talking of the need for cooperation. But in reality, this has not been a day for considered policy making, but for desperate firefighting. There is no question that Europe's banking and financial systems have been under quite colossal stress today. But now the question is, can there be an adequate political response? Well, tomorrow, Europe's finance ministers meet in Luxembourg to try and replace confusion with coordination. Robert Moore, News at 10, Berlin.
Our political editor Tom Bradby joins us now. Tom, another promise by the Prime Minister tonight to do what's necessary, but no action by government seems enough these days.
Well, Trevor, you've certainly got some of the opposition parties tonight beginning to say quietly and largely in private, hey, what's going on in there? Is there some dithering going on? You're going to get one or two newspapers beginning to weigh in and say similar things tomorrow morning. But I think almost everyone around here would probably agree with an iron rule of modern politics. When you have a problem, you have to hit it with a big enough stick to make sure that it's killed. Now, there's no doubt there are intensive discussions going on in here behind me about what to do next. I don't think you're going to see the Prime Minister or the Chancellor coming out and guarantee all savings, because I don't think the Prime Minister thinks that is the issue. In his view, no British bank is about to go bust. There is liquidity, there is cash there. The real problem in his eyes is the fact that banks are not lending to each other, and there is the real risk, as Daisy was suggesting there, that the whole economy grounds to a halt. So he is talking about this bank recapitalisation plan. We as taxpayers all put in some money, encourage the banks to keep lending. We get some shares, if you like, so we share in the upside later on. But I think he wants to be very, very clear that if he goes that road, that it is going to work, because the worst of all worlds in a lot of respects would be for taxpayers to put a whole bundle of money in and for that not to cure the problem.
Tom Bradby, thank you.
One of the men blamed by millions of Americans for their financial woes faced the music and faced hostile politicians in Washington today. The now disgraced boss of the collapsed bank Lehman Brothers, Richard Fuld, was made to defend his multi-million-pound salary and bonuses. As our Washington correspondent John Irvine reports, he was subjected to the people's revenge.
He was never going to be asked, "Are you sitting comfortably?" But then this grilling, the price of failure, lasted just 2 hours. When Richard Fuld was in Lehman's hot seat last year, the price he exacted was $17,000 an hour. He tried to convince ordinary Americans he feels their pain.
This is a pain that will stay with me for the rest of my life.
In the 7 years leading up to Lehman's bankruptcy last month, the CEO earned nearly $500 million.
But I wake up every single night thinking, what could I have done differently?
But where to spend those sleepless nights? Fuld has a $21 million New York apartment, an $8 million estate in Connecticut, and another $13 million one in Florida, and he'll keep them all. This Fuld and his money will not be easily parted.
But you get to keep $480 million. I have a very basic question for you. Is this fair?
A tricky one which he never really answered. When his firm collapsed, employees vented their anger, scribbling messages on his portrait outside. Fould has called what happened a tragedy, but it's hardly a Shakespearean one. Despite the slings and arrows, he'll keep his outrageous fortune.
But you don't seem to acknowledge that you did anything wrong. And that, I think, is also troubling to me. Thank you very much for being here. That concludes our hearing for today, and we stand adjourned.
John Irvine, News at 10, Washington.
There were accounts of great bravery among brother soldiers in Afghanistan today, but claims too of terrible errors in the inquest into the death of one of them. Corporal Mark Wright was blown up by a mine trying to save a comrade's life. He didn't have a map of the minefield. The first rescue helicopter arrived without a winch, and the second took 5 hours to reach the scene. Damon Green heard the evidence.
It's soldiers like Mark Wright who've earned the British Army every victory it's ever had. Fearless, selfless, a leader who could take his men anywhere. This is the theatre of war. It's here the conflict will be lost and won, around the strategic Kajaki Dam in Helmand province. 2 years ago, Mark Wright was amongst the paras who faced down the Taliban. The insurgents are still there. Today, other British units fight the same seemingly endless battle. The corporal was leading the operation to rescue a soldier who'd stepped on a mine in the Kajaki region of Helmand province. Aware of the danger, his team entered the minefield, but minutes later, a soldier stepped on another mine, losing a leg. Mark Wright radioed for rescue and administered first aid. A Chinook arrived, but it wasn't fitted with a winch to airlift the men and was forced to withdraw. As it did so, another mine was detonated, causing severe injuries to Corporal Wright, and it then took 5 hours for a US helicopter fitted with a winch to rescue the team. For Mark Wright's patrol, that minefield lay in uncharted territory, and yet a map did exist, its information available over a month before that ill-fated mission. Now obtained by ITV News, it was apparently only printed the day after Mark Wright was killed. Captain Nick French of 3 Para told the court he was shocked by the way information about minefields wasn't communicated to men on the ground. Corporal Wright's bravery may have been acknowledged with a George Cross. His mother and father want someone in command to acknowledge they let him down. This is a map of all the minefields around the Kajaki Dam on the day that Corporal Mark Wright died. Ministry of Defence have given the map to his family, and they've given it to us. The only person who didn't have it, they believe, was Corporal Wright himself. And it's easy to understand why they believe if he'd had this map, he'd still be alive today. Damon Green, News at 10, at Oxford Coroner's Court.
The senior officer in charge of the police operation that ended with the death of Jean-Charles de Menezes said today he died because of what she called unfortunate coincidences. Cressida Dick told the inquest into his death that he was unfortunate to live in the same block as a possible terrorist and unfortunate to look like him. As our UK editor Angus Walker reports, she told the de Menezes inquest none of the officers involved did anything wrong.
Cressida Dick was a highly experienced commander with hundreds of armed police operations under her belt. The high-flying graduate was part of a small team developing special tactics to deal with suicide bombers known as Operation Kratos. So no surprise perhaps that she was chosen to be in command of the hunt for the 21-7 bombers. Ultimately, her decision-making, now under days of scrutiny, led to this innocent man being shot dead. Promoted since the shooting of Jean-Charles de Menezes, in court, the Deputy Assistant Commissioner was asked quite simply what went wrong. Mr. de Menezes was the victim of some terrible and extraordinary circumstances. If you ask me whether I think anybody did anything wrong or unreasonable in the operation, I would say I don't think they did. On the day of the shooting, Cressida Dick was running the fast-moving and pressurised operation from a control room on the 16th floor of Scotland Yard. She was in charge of a plan to surround a block of flats in South London where the police believed one of the escaped 21-7 bombers was hiding out. It was also where, by unfortunate coincidence, Jean-Charles de Menezes lived. Outside the flats, undercover officers filmed people leaving. A firearms team needed to stop any suspects never arrived. and Jean-Charles, a possible terrorist, had left home and got onto a bus before Cressida Dick was even aware of his existence. Although surveillance officers, seen here identified by their code names, were shadowing Jean-Charles and debating on their radios whether he was the suspect they were hunting, Cressida Dick told the jury, "I wouldn't be able to say I had a complete picture of what they were saying or what was going on." There to see and hear for herself was Jean-Charles's mother. At times she had to be helped from her seat and comforted in a private room. Angus Walker, News at 10.
The Plymouth Argyle goalkeeper Luke McCormick is tonight beginning 7 years in jail after finally admitting that his drunk and dangerous driving killed 2 young boys. McCormick was twice over the limit when his speeding Range Rover hit Aaron and Ben Peake's car on the M6. Their parents cried in court. They wanted a longer sentence. Rohit Katru was there.
Confronted by the family he destroyed, there were screams of anger as Luke McCormick arrived at court. They were here for justice, and they clutched images of the young faces McCormick will never be allowed to forget.
Look what he took away from us.
Aaron and Ben Peake were with their family on their way to Silverstone when they were killed. They would never get their dream day of watching fast cars because of the dangerous drunk driving of a speeding motorist. And this is the journey which would end in their deaths. McCormick was travelling home from a wedding the night before. Here you can see a cloud of dust as he hits the edge of the road. An hour into the journey at 5:38 a.m, he's captured as he swerves towards the central reservation. By now a friend had called, begging him to pull over, but he drove on. At 5:43 he's seen yards behind the Peake's Toyota. The crash took place moments later. His victim could have been anyone driving along the stretch of road.
McCormick hit the Peake's car with his Range Rover, forcing it to roll down this embankment and to hit several trees along the way.
Difficult.
Speaking weeks later, the parents of the Peake brothers spoke of their agony.
Wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. You really wouldn't. It's heartbreaking to lose 2 babies. Isn't it?
It is. Today, Philip, still confined to a wheelchair by the crash, had a police officer speak on behalf of him and his family.
Our sons will never experience things Luke has had. Phil will carry the scars of the incident for life. We will both carry the emotional scars forever. Thank you.
There is now surely no professional future for the drink-driving footballer seen here promoting driver safety. But what future for the family he destroyed, who must endure so much more? Rohit Katru, News at 10, Staffordshire.
The widow of Greater Manchester Police Chief Michael Todd said today she'd forgiven him for his tangled love life. An inquest heard that it had contributed to his death. The coroner was told that Mr. Todd sent desperate text messages before he died from a cocktail of drink and drugs. His wife had found out that he was having an affair. His body was found near the top of Mount Snowdon in March.
A grandmother and her daughter from Smethwick in Birmingham have been jailed for 27 years between them for smuggling 16 kilos of cocaine into the UK. The drugs which Ambrosine Heron and Paulette Chambers smuggled had a street value of £800,000.
A date's been set for the Glenrothes by-election in Fife, the latest test of the government's popularity. It will be held on November the 6th, 2 days after the American presidential election.
The victims of the Buncefield oil depot fire are a step closer to compensation worth millions of pounds. The oil company Total has changed part of its defence in the High Court. The company is fighting a legal action brought on by insurance companies, businesses and residents affected by the explosion 3 years ago. Some of man's closest relatives in the animal kingdom are at risk of dying out from man's destructive habits. The International Union for Conservation of Nature claims nearly a quarter of all mammals face extinction. As our science editor Lawrence McGinty explains, 2 of our fellow primates, the orangutan and the gorilla, are on their danger list.
The list of mammals in peril gets longer and longer. Caspian seals in steep decline. The Iberian lynx, only 143 individuals left. Orangutans hunted and burnt out by forest clearance. Zoos can help with breeding and reintroduction programs, but the picture is bleak. Over 1,000 species of our closest relatives, like these gorillas, are threatened with extinction. Soon, zoos may be the only place we can see these magnificent animals. These lowland gorillas are critically endangered. Primate species seem to be particularly at risk. In southern Asia, 79% of primates are in danger. Hunting for food or for trophies is one of the most severe pressure on primates. But for other mammals, the biggest threat is simply us. We take their habitat. Scientists estimate there are only 680 mountain gorillas left under threat from poaching, loss of habitat and human disease. Around 50,000 orangutans survive, but they're endangered by forest burning for palm oil plantations and by illegal trading as pets. And the Yangtze River dolphin is one of 29 mammals which are already extinct, exterminated by pollution and riverboat traffic. But the threat can be reversed. In Rwanda, mountain gorillas are prospering, protected by wardens, paid for by the boom in tourists coming to see these amazing beasts. Sadly, however, that story is all too rare. Lawrence McGinty, News at 10.
Our headline tonight is the huge fall in share prices in London.
The FTSE fell almost 8%, its worst fall since the Black Monday crash of 1987.
And finally, a couple have somehow managed to recycle 60,000 items to be able to claim a rather environmentally UN-friendly reward on their supermarket loyalty cards. Ironically, what they get for doing all this are 2 business-class flights from Atlanta. But at least, as Geraint Vincent reports, they were for their honeymoon.
Recycling has become quite a habit for this newlywed. That's mainly because of the cash incentive her local supermarket gives its customers to do the responsible thing with their waste packaging. But to pay for 2 transatlantic business class flights home from a honeymoon, you have to collect a lot of rubbish.
We'd come down here with big black bags full of rubbish, and we'd often be here for hours at a time just doing this, putting bits in, putting more bits in, and hearing the drone of the machine going all the time, but it paid off.
Must be love.
Love, or maybe we're just both stubborn, I'm not sure.
Annie and John got married in August and then went off on a dream honeymoon to the American West. But for 3 months beforehand, they'd been out around the neighbourhood every evening, collecting anything they could recycle to put towards the cost of their trip.
It's only, I think, when you're looking for rubbish that you notice quite how much rubbish there is. When you're not looking, you notice the odd bit, but when you're looking for it, you notice quite how much there is.
Quite right to think of you as a pair of environmentalists, is it? Because I suppose the thing you did with your air miles was, of course, to spend them on some polluting flights.
Well, I like to think of it as offsetting our carbon footprint.
Recycling is now very much part of the domestic routine, and although going down to the recycling centre may not always be something you can do together, this is a marriage which looks 100% renewable. Geraint Vincent, News at 10, Hampshire.
Love at the paperback. That's tonight's News at 10.
Coming next, the national weather and the news where you are tonight. We're back at the same time tomorrow. But now from Julie and from me and from all of us here, good night.
Good night.
Your courtesy car will be with you this afternoon. Thanks for calling eShore. Bye.
ITV National Weather, sponsored by eShore.
Hello again. Central and eastern parts of the UK hang on to the dry conditions as we move through the night, but the rain out towards the west is pepping up, and also the winds freshening as well as the frontal system moves in and gives a very wet end to the night for you. And as we look ahead to tomorrow, it's wet for everyone. Some very heavy bursts in place as well, and gale force winds expected through the channel. Into the afternoon, and very little improves, apart from maybe a little bit of brightness across Northern Ireland, but elsewhere continuing wet and windy. Further south, a little bit more of improvement, particularly across the west western parts, but even here some fairly blustery showers in places. You can see the wind still fairly strong as well, particularly out towards the west. We could see 50-mile-an-hour gusts towards the southernmost areas. That's it from me. Good night. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
ITV National Weather, sponsored by eShore.
If you buy over 4 square metres of wall, floor or natural stone tiles, we'll give you a massive 30% discount right now. Trust the specialists. Tops Tiles. Tiling the nation.
Earn up to 7.32% AER variable tax-free when you transfer your cash ISA to NatWest. But be quick, offer ends soon.
A refreshing way to make your money go further at Morrison's. This week, these beers and ciders are only £8 a case. The Price Crunch at Morrison's.
Good evening, I'm Claire Weller. Tonight's headlines. Guilty of murder, the neighbour who turned on his elderly friend and beat her with a hammer. She's battled for the rights of women. Now Jermaine Greer speaks out to save our villages. And the roadworks at the heart of this seaside town causing a massive headache for drivers. First, a man's been found guilty of brutally murdering an elderly woman at her sheltered bungalow. Heather Burton was beaten to death with a hammer at her home in Reefham in Norfolk last November. Her neighbour, Colin Barker, denied killing her, but today a jury at Norwich Crown Court found him guilty of murder and he was sentenced to life. John Francis reports.
This is the very quiet sheltered housing complex at Sunbarn Walk in Reefham, where 79-year-old Heather Burton was an extremely popular member of the community, according to the police, who also said tonight that she'd been a friend to Colin Barker, her next-door neighbour, and given him, as they put it, the benefit of the doubt when other people might not have been quite so trusting. In the end, it cost this lady her life, and although her murderer is behind bars tonight, he still hasn't explained what was the trigger for what he did. In the words of the judge, Colin Barker, who's 64, had a checkered past and 2 failed relationships behind him when he came to live at Sunbarn Walk. In his past, a clutch of convictions for deception, theft and wounding. But Heather Burton let him into her home on almost a daily basis, and they looked out for each other. One day, though, for reasons not made clear in court, they fell out, and Barker, in the words of Judge Peter Jacobs, completely lost it. He attacked Mrs. Burton with a hammer wrapped in a plastic bag and continued to strike her as she lay defenceless on the kitchen floor. At least 14 blows were struck. Outside Norwich Crown Court this afternoon, with Barker sentenced to life imprisonment, Heather Burton's family thanked the police and prosecution service.
We have had to endure the pain daily for nearly 12 months, and although we will never forget what has happened, we will now need to get on with the rest of our lives. Happy in the thought that Colin Barker is locked up and cannot harm another person in the community.
Barker had indulged in what the prosecution called a charade to draw suspicion away from himself. The day after the attack, he went back to Mrs. Burton's home, pretended to discover her body and raise the alarm. He claimed to have had nothing to do with her death and said he'd only wanted to help. But he had disposed of his hammer in a waste bin in the local graveyard, and it was found days later. This is a crime that shocked the small town of Reefham.
Reefham is such a quiet, sort of respectable place, so something, that level of violence to come out of that is really, totally unexpected.
I knew the bloke. He used to speak to me as he came by, and he was friendly, and seemed as if he wouldn't hurt anybody. And he used to do shopping for people in the old people's homes and things like that. Can't understand it. Something must have gone totally wrong with him.
So tonight, Colin Barker begins a life sentence with a minimum tariff of 15 years. John Francis, Anglia News.
Police are investigating the discovery of a man's body at an isolated spot at Great Witchingham in Norfolk. The body was found by a member of the public at Rabbit Lane, not far from the Bernard Matthews factory, at about 1:45 this afternoon. Officers are now trying to identify the man, who's believed to have been aged between 30 and 50. They're asking anyone with information to contact them. The former Ipswich Town footballer Kevin Beattie has been arrested on suspicion of theft. Beattie, who's now 54, was held over the disappearance of a sum of cash. He was a fan's favourite during his time at Portman Road, where he's regarded by many as the club's greatest ever player. Beattie, who still lives in Ipswich, says it's all a misunderstanding. He'll appear in court next month. An organisation set up to champion rural communities has launched in Essex. The independent Essex Rural Commission has brought together a mix of talent to tackle problems such as the closure of shops and post offices, the lack of affordable homes, and village schools and pubs under threat. Diane Stradling reports.
It sounds like a take on an old nursery rhyme. Forget the butcher and baker. This time it's the farmer, the academic, the businessman, the villager, and among the rest, the radical, Shemaine Greer. The Independent Commission met today on a farm near Witham, promising to help rural communities survive. Professor Greer, the iconic feminist, is a passionate Essex fan. It's countryside and people.
We do not have a squirearchy. There aren't a whole lot of ridiculous people strutting around announcing that they're better than the rest of us. In Essex, people tend to stand pretty much shoulder to shoulder.
Shemaine Greer's own home patch, 3 acres of northwest Essex, is 50 miles away from today's launch and not far from Chrysal near Saffron Walden. The village is like dozens across the region who felt beleaguered enough before the credit crunch. Chrysal's post office and village shop are both now shut. Locals say the loss is felt keenly.
It's been a little bit hard, but people club together and they get taken to the local post office to get their pension, stuff like that.
Particularly elderly people now know where to go and sort of meet up and have a lovely old chat and things. The bus service is very limited.
The Commission will hold public meetings, talk to experts and take evidence on a wide range of issues, from rural transport, housing and jobs to preserving wildlife and countryside, taking in schools, shops, post offices and poverty. It'll be independent but funded by Essex County Council, which sees this as another trailblazing initiative, like its support of local post offices. It's reopening a third one soon.
We're looking ahead for 25 years. In other words, what sorts of things need to be done to improve rural life and coastal life of Essex?
The Commission should have developed concrete proposals to feed into the long-term strategy for Essex by this time next year. Diane Stradling, Anglia News, Witham.
Drivers in Great Yarmouth have been facing long queues after one of only 2 routes into the town closed for resurfacing work. The council says the repairs are necessary before the town's new outer harbour opens next year, but it does mean a month-long headache for motorists. Sasha Williams reports.
It's something that can get even the most laid-back of motorists seeing red. Queues and queues of traffic caused by roadworks. And in Great Yarmouth today, the congestion was caused by this: resurfacing work on the town's Hall Quay. It's the first of a 5-phase project to improve roads here, making sure they'll be able to support the large volumes of traffic that will pass through when the new outer harbour opens.
We're on the Haven Bridge, and usually at this time of day there'd be a constant stream of traffic coming along here, but as you can see, that lane's completely empty, blocked off by the resurfacing work, which means any traffic that would want to use this usually now has to be diverted elsewhere. That means at times the only way in or out of Great Yarmouth will be via Bure Bridge to the north. Drivers should expect tailbacks on the approaches to the bridge, including the A12 and the A47. Those who rely on this route for work aren't impressed.
4 and 6, that's terrible, you know, you take 40 minutes to do a 10-minute job, you know.
Saturday afternoon it is taking me from Britannia Pier to here, which would normally go, let's say £4, it went £10 I think. I mean, people are not going to pay it, are they? We are losing work, without a doubt.
The work also means dozens of bus routes will be affected. The council, though, insists this is a necessary part of preparations for the £70 million outer harbour project, which it says will boost the town's economy.
The work's essential, that's the key point. The road is just about worn out, and we've brought it forward. We're spending something like £1 million to put in a high-quality job which will give us a good long life.
Work is expected to last until the 1st of November.
And while drivers are being assured it's short-term pain for long-term gain, for many who use this road regularly, it could be a very long month. Sasha Williams, Anglia News, Great Yarmouth.
And the skies were lovely and blue over Great Yarmouth today, but will it last? Time for the weather now with Amanda Houston.
Lightening the load for home buyers. Mortgages from Norwich and Peterborough, sponsors of Anglia Weather.
Hello again. Well, some heavy rain and strong winds on the way tomorrow, but it's turning nicer and brighter by Wednesday as the low pressure which has been causing all this damp and miserable weather moves out of the way on Wednesday, and in behind it comes an area of high pressure which will turn things drier and brighter for the next few days. So back to the rest of tonight, and it will be fairly cloudy with the chance of the odd shower, but feeling mild in lows of 12 or 13 degrees. And it will be a dry start for most of us tomorrow, but then the rain edges in from the west, bringing some showers to our part of the region. And it doesn't get any better in the afternoon as those showers become heavy in places, although they should ease off later in the day, and feeling breezy, although temperatures still manage to get up to around 17 degrees there. So we've got some good news for you now as things become drier and brighter by Wednesday. More bright spells on Thursday and Friday, but we could see the showers again on Saturday, and those winds becoming lighter for a time, but then becoming stronger again as we get towards the weekend, and those temperatures staying in the high teens there. So onto the summary, and it's heavy rain and strong winds on Tuesday, becoming mostly dry with some sunny spells on Wednesday. That's all from the Anglia weather team. Night night.
Mortgages from the experts at Norwich and Peterborough.
And that's all from us on the Anglia News team for now. Good night.